Members in the audience, welcome to the Education and Instruction Subcommittee on Tuesday, February 14th, 2023. Happy Valentine's Day. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Representative Chisholm. Here. Representative Glenn. Here. Representative Hakeem. Here. Representative Hicks. Here. Representative Johnson. Here. Representative Leatherwood. Here. Representative McCowan. Chair Lady Moody. Here. Representative Reagan. Here. Representative Raper. Here. Representative Warner. Here. Representative White. Here. Chairman Sapicki.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Members, are there any personal orders before we begin? Upon seeing none, hey, just for the record, going next week, if you're going to present in this committee, we have these new forms you have to fill out. If you want to speak in this committee ever, notify my assistant, Jan Wright. She'll get you this information so you can fill it out so you'll be able to speak here and we'll know who you represent, what your position is, et cetera, so that we can have a little bit better balance going back and forth between presenters on bills. Members, we have a calendar today. I'm going to call up first up House Bills 896 by Chairman Hurt. Do I have a motion? Motion is second. Chairman Hurt, you have a motion is second. Present your bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, in 2016, when the legislature, in partnership with the Governor's Office and the State Board of Education, undertook the replacement of Common Core state standards and put into place arguably the most transparent and thorough standards review and input process in the country for English language arts, math, science, and social studies. At that time, we set the cycle for each of these reviews at once every 6 years. This legislation proposes to extend the cycle to once every 8 years. With the pandemic and other considerations during that time, as well as the increased workload for the Textbook and Instructional Materials Commission, as well as the need for teachers to get used to teaching standards before they are substantially changed, the State Board of Education is seeking this change in the timeline going forward. The change is welcomed by districts as well as the Textbook and Instructional Materials Commission. What I'd like to bring your attention to is the fiscal note on this, and there's been some questions about it, but I feel like we're in pretty good shape here. It decreases state expenditures by over $100,000. Very rarely do you see a decrease in state expenditures. It also is a decrease in local expenditures of estimated at around $16 million a year. And we feel that that would free up some money for the locals to even put toward K through 3 early literacy education. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll take the questions.
Thank you, Chairman Hurt. Members, do we have any questions on the bill? Representative Johnson.
Thank you. So I just have a question related to, just briefly spoke before with the Tennessee State School Board, but this does not prevent us from revisiting something in the standards that we feel like might be an issue in advance of that.
That's correct, accurate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Hakeem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't know if Representative Hurt wanted to take this, but, well, maybe Mr. James, if it's acceptable.
He has not signed up to speak.
Okay,
so.
okay, all right. We passed a piece dealing with Black history last year, and the question came up as to this change from 6 years to 8 years. Will this prevent that new section from being in the new social studies book?
Chairman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It will not prevent it or delay it. We're not delaying anything. We're just extending the time frame, so no, it will not.
Okay, just wanted to get it on the record.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Chairman White.
Now, I think my questions are being addressed. I just want to go back and make sure I understand, because I didn't get a chance to talk to the State Board. What is our reasoning, again, going from 6 to 8? What is the impetus behind that?
Chairman Hurt, if you want to answer that question.
Yes, sir. I'll go back to my opening statement. With the pandemic and other considerations during the time, and as well as the increased workload for the Textbook and Instructional Materials Commission. In addition, for the teachers to get used to teaching those standards before we change them, before we change those standards on them. So, you know, the increased workload on the Textbook and Instructional Materials Commission, along with giving teachers more time to get used to teaching standards before any substantive change.
Okay, so I think I said, so we're not talking about materials here, we're talking about standards, more or less, okay.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Members? Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think someone else is suffering from mic problems here.
It's not me, I promise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, for the purposes of clarity, the extension of these review periods does not prohibit the intermediate reconsideration by direction of this body, or for that matter, on the initiative of the State Board or the review committee as they see fit. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Representative McKean?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there are proposed changes to what we have in place now by the state board or the legislature, that would be, as a committee, we'd be notified of that, I'm asking.
Yes, sir, that's in the law already.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Little chairman's privilege here. Chairman Hurt, one of the things that I've talked to teachers about your bill is because the standards are on a 6-year cycle, about the time the teachers become very familiar with the information to be able to teach it to our students, we're going through another adoption cycle. This would give them more time to become more familiar and drill down even deeper with our students, having the longer time to focus on those extended standards. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any more questions for Chairman Hurt? We'll be voting on sending House Bill 896 to full education instruction. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. You're on to the next committee, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Next up, House Bill 691 by Representative Parkinson. Do I have a motion? Have a second? Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. Happy Valentine's Day to you. And so House Bill 691, it does exactly what the caption says. It requires the board to allow 1 credit of data science to satisfy one of the mathematics credits required for high school graduation. And I actually got this bill idea from the Excel in Education Conference, Jeb Bush's conference, and there was a presentation that spoke to the future of you know, what our kids will be facing, what our kids will be looking at in regards to you know, technology and workforce, and data science was at the top of that list in that presentation. And I thought it was a brilliant idea to add this as an opportunity for one of the choices that seniors can make in their required math classes. So that's what it does.
Members, you've heard the presentation on the bill. Do you have any questions? Chairman Reagan.
Thank you. My microphone is not cooperating today. 2 questions. First off, data science or data science, is it, I didn't see it defined in your bill. What are we talking about for a definition? Because if we don't define this term, it's kind of what somebody says it is.
Right.
Did I miss that? Was it in the bill and I missed it?
Representative Parkinson.
You know, that's a really good question. I don't know if we defined it in the bill, but it's already defined. But basically what it does is it teaches children how to mine data and tell the story that data is telling.
Okay, I have a little bit of problem with that, because what we're doing here is turning a term loose that those of us who routinely deal with data, and I did in my career before I came here, would argue over exactly what that is, because the arrangement of data could be considered data science. The manipulation of data, as in statistics, could be. And if it's some or all or any of that, especially if we're talking about an entire credit, I would like to see that defined more specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chairman Reagan. I'm okay with that. I don't have an issue with it. Make sure that that's defined for us.
So do you want to roll your bill a week and come back with a definition? Because we checked with legal, data science is not defined in code at all. Go ahead.
We're not going to take my definition. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I thought there was another question. I will roll it a week, but if you'll allow Representative Johnson to ask her question so I can get that information to her in case there's anything else.
That's fine. The one thing I would like to just caution is, normally the state board is the one who tells us what they're going to allow for credits. We'd be in dangerous territory right here dictating from these seats what we're going to allow for credits and what we're not going to allow for credits. So if we roll this bill a week, I'd ask you to consider that and work with the state board to make sure that they understand the intention of your bill, and plus make sure we get a definition on it, because we're kind of in uncharted territory a little bit, because we did have computer science, which is defined, but data science is not. So Representative Johnson, go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at this point, is there a course labeled data science with standards in the Tennessee curriculum defined already?
At this time, there is not.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman White, you want to ask a question?
I was just going, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just mentioning, look into the bill we passed last year on computer science. We passed that, dealing with incorporating that into our high school curriculum. So check that out. It may help a little bit.
Is 1 week enough? Go ahead, Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will look into that and mirror your language so that we won't have any issues when I come back with it. And I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly fine. And, I think 1 week should be enough for me to get with it.
Representative Johnson, you want to follow up?
Yes, thank you. I did want to say there is a struggle in high schools for kids to find that fourth math sometimes. So, new ideas are great, make sure they're valid. But I can promise you as a high school teacher, finding that fourth year math is very difficult for a lot of kids. So.
Go ahead, Representative Parker.
And Representative Johnson, thank you for that. And, I thought if I came in here and evoked the name of Jeb Bush, that, this thing would sail on through. But apparently, I'm just kidding y'all. But if you will, can we roll it for a week?
Without objection, we'll roll 1 week.
Thank you.
The button again.
All right, members, we have some presentations today. The presenters will be limited to 5 minutes, and then we'll have to take questions. American Federation for Children is not here today. They could not make it. First up, we have Western Governors University. I believe it's Dr. Kim Estep. Dr. Estep, if you'll introduce yourself, and you'll have 5 minutes, and then we'll ask questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me.
Press your button.
Oh. Did that do it?
There you go.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to speak before you this afternoon. 10 years ago this April, I received a call that would change my life. I was at that time the Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs at Nashville State Community College. When this call came, I was down the hall from my office leading a committee meeting that was right around the corner, and my assistant showed up in the door and flagged me down and pulled me out of the committee to tell me that there was a call that had come in from the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. Now, knowing that a call from THEC was generally not good news, she decided that rather than take the message, she would go get me out of the committee meeting, so I took the call. My colleague at THEC told me that the state legislature had just authorized the formation of a Tennessee affiliate of Western Governors University, and he had nominated me to lead the initiative. He wanted to let me know right away because he was leaving for a family vacation the very next day, and he did not want me to be taken unawares if I received a call about this opportunity in his absence. My knowledge of WGU at that time was very limited. A regular reader of the Chronicle of Higher Education, I had heard of it as an online university that was somewhat controversial. Whispers I had heard among other TBR institutions of WGU's imminent arrival in our state expressed concerns about possible competition with state institutions. So I began to do my own research about the institution. I was surprised as I read about the model. As I began to do research, I realized they had no set class times. A faculty member was appointed that worked with each student individually to create and execute an academic plan. Competency-based courses were in the curriculum where students could complete their exams and their papers on their own schedule. A flat rate tuition was charged, which allowed students to take as many courses as they could complete within a 6-month term. It was heresy. And that is exactly the word I used when I told my husband about it. I said, this will throw me out of higher education for the rest of my career. It's so different. It was an approach, though, that fit perfectly with the needs of working adults. And I loved those students. I started my career as a history professor, and my favorite students were my returning adult students. Back in the 1990s, I taught evening classes and Saturday morning classes as a professor, classes nobody else wanted to take and wanted to teach, because I loved those students. They were really overscheduled. They were juggling work, full-time jobs usually. They had their own families. They worked in their communities. But they were so engaged with learning. They wanted to learn. They would rewrite that assignment as many times as it took for them to get it right. They were committed to their educations. I was intrigued enough by WGU's model that I accepted a meeting with the president at that time, Bob Mendenhall. After a series of interviews, I became convinced of WGU's reputability and the power of its model for working adults. And I was offered the job as the inaugural chancellor of WGU Tennessee. The affiliate launched officially on July the 9th of 2013, and I've never looked back. Much is being said now in these halls about WGU being an out-of-state institution, but I am a Tennessean, as are the 204 faculty and staff members who live in our state. Our 4,500 students and almost 10,000 alumni live in all 95 counties of this state. All of our students, 100% of them, are Tennessee residents by definition. They are going back to college at an average age of 35 in order to give their families a better life and to support their local community. Virtually all of them will stay in the state of Tennessee when they complete their degree. When I started as chancellor of WGU Tennessee in July of 2013, even I, a former vice president at a TBR community college, had never heard of the non-traditional hope. Did you know that only 281 students were awarded scholarships from this fund last year? It was the then president of Chattanooga State Community College, where we signed our first community college partnership, who alerted me of the existence of this program. Low-income students over the age of 25 earn their way into non-traditional hope, he told me, by taking their first term on their own dime. And then if they earn a high enough GPA, they can become eligible for hope. Unlike the traditional Hope Scholarship, they must be low income with a family income below $36,000 a year. He was distressed that many of his graduates would literally lose hope if they chose to continue their education to pursue a bachelor's degree at WGU. And that is exactly what happens. The combination of the TSAA need-based grant, which our students are eligible for, and the non-traditional Hope Scholarship, which our students are not currently eligible for, would pay for virtually all the direct costs of education at WGU. Our average tuition is $7,500, roughly $2,000 less expensive than Tennessee's public universities and a fraction of the cost of a private institution. Even though they lose their non-traditional Hope eligibility, more than 600 of our current students who would be eligible at other institutions have chosen WGU Tennessee to get their degree. They have not been choosing between WGU Tennessee and other institutions in the state. They have chosen between WGU Tennessee and no college at all. For them, a degree from WGU lifts and strengthens their families and their communities and has intergenerational impact. 10 years since our creation, this public-private partnership between WGU and Tennessee has been a tremendous success. We have awarded almost 10,000 degrees to Tennessee residents. We have grown from about 700 students in 2013 to almost 4,500 students today. We have awarded $5.2 million in scholarships to Tennesseans, more than paying back the initial investment that the state of Tennessee made in creating WGU Tennessee. It's been an honor for me to devote 10 years to this enterprise, to our students, our partners, and our graduates. Thank you today for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Eastep. First of all, can you explain flat tuition, flat rate tuition?
Yes, so our students do proceed through a curriculum of coursework when they sign up for their first term at WGU, which can start the first of any month. They are paying for 6 months of education at WGU Tennessee. So as they finish each course, they're initially given 4 if they're an undergraduate student to complete in that time, either simultaneously or one at a time. Most of them as working adults do them one at a time. If they finish early, they can add more classes at no additional cost. So it can cost them much less to complete the degree if they're able to accelerate, which is why working adults love this model so much.
Members, any questions? Chairman Reagan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. and we need to get some maintenance people in here to look at the microphones. Can you hear me okay? I'd like to have you expand a little bit on your faculty. How many, what credentials, and what do they have to do?
Well, our faculty work with students in a myriad of ways. So we hire 3 different kinds of specialist faculty. So there is one type of faculty we hire, all terminally degreed, who create, develop, and maintain all of our academic programs. That is what they do. That's their full job. We hire other faculty we call course instructors who are assigned to a particular course. They work with students as they move in and out of that particular course to help them get prepared for the testing that they have to complete, for papers that they have to write, for all the assignments in that course. So they may work with a student for only a matter of weeks because those students finish early, or they may work with a student for a term or 2 or 3 until they finally make it through that course. And then finally, each student gets a faculty mentor that is assigned to them at the beginning, calls them at least weekly to begin with, sometimes more often, to make sure that they have stayed on track with their plan, with their academic plan. So these are busy professionals. That works in a lot of ways, I would say, like case management, where they have a caseload of students. They are calling them, they are staying in touch with them, they're looking to see how they do on their assessments, they're referring them out for additional support from the writing center or the math center if they need it. And so they are really a concierge for that student as they move their way throughout the program. Some of those program mentors have master's degrees, but our course instructors and our program development faculty have terminal degrees, which would be expected and actually is required by accreditation for all institutions.
Thank you.
How do you handle your remedial coursework?
So we don't offer remedial courses. We are a baccalaureate institution. If we bring students in who need additional work, they do that work while they are engaged within the college level course. And so again, because we hold learning steady and time can flex, a course that might take one student a month to complete might take another student many months to complete. They have to keep at it until they reach that threshold of competency. There is no extra credit. There is no kind of passing them along because they've stuck with it all semester. They actually have to reach, by virtue of examination, proctored examination, a certain height of knowledge, and it doesn't matter how long it takes them. That's where they have to go.
Members, Chairman White?
Thank you, Chairman and Dr. Esther. You said over the last 10 years, 10,000 degrees. Currently, we have 4,500 students, but issue about 10,000 degrees.
Well, we are on track to issue 10,000 right now. I think it's 9,600 and change. We're awarding about 100 to 125 degrees a month.
Can you give me kind of a breakdown of what kind of degrees that the students are getting and how this maybe relates to our Tennessee workforce?
I can. So we only have 4 colleges. So we offer the College of Education, which trains teachers. We have the College of Health Professions, which is nursing and health informatics and allied health fields. We have the College of IT and the College of Business. Those are the only colleges we offer. We were created by a group of governors, and they're very workforce focused. So here in Tennessee, we have about 2,600 graduates of our College of Education. Almost 1,000 of those are new teachers that we've added into the state of Tennessee. The rest of those would be teachers who are upskilling through a master's degree. We also have upskilled almost 3,000 nurses, and then the rest are divided between business college and IT college.
Go ahead, Chairman.
Of the 2,500 teachers, I'm interested in that pipeline. We're congratulations on that. But this is totally online, right? Or is it, what about, do they go into the classroom at some point?
They do. They do student teaching just as any other student teacher would do in the classroom. We hire local faculty, again, just like every other university that oversee that work.
Okay, thank you.
Members? Ms. Sips, thank you for your presentation. Very
Thank you so
insightful.
much.
Thank you very much. Next up, Foundation for Excellence in Education and Action, XLED in Action. Mr. Powers, if you'll introduce yourself, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, members of the committee, and thank you, Chairman Sapicki, for inviting me to speak today. So my name is Jack Powers. I'm the Southeast Regional Advocacy Director for the Foundation for Excellence in Education, or XLED for short. So we are a nonprofit education policy and advocacy organization who focus on a number of issues from college and career readiness to early literacy. And it is early literacy that I'm here to talk about today, both the landscape of early literacy policy in Tennessee and what the research shows on Tennessee's test-based promotion policy, or as some call it, the retention law. So many of you may know me from my former role as the Director of Policy at the Tennessee Department of Education. And it was there that I was fortunate enough to work with Governor Lee's team and you all, the General Assembly, as you took bold action to address, during the education's focused special session of 2021, a number of education issues, including low third grade literacy rates and learning loss. You passed two specific bills, the Tennessee Literacy Success Act and the Tennessee Learning Loss Remediation and Student Acceleration Act. So while the conversation leading up to this year has largely focused on the test-based promotion portion of just one of those acts, I did want to take a little bit of time to kind of talk about how, when viewed together, both of those laws work in tandem to holistically support Tennessee's students, families, and teachers. So the first act, the Tennessee Literacy Success Act, covered early literacy instruction. The act required school districts to ground early grades instruction in the research-backed foundational literacy skills of phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Schools in Tennessee are now required to administer a universal reading screener to students in kindergarten through third grade 3 times a year to provide teachers with the quick diagnostic data they need to adjust their teaching. The act also required district communication and resource sharing with parents and guardians to ensure the reading journey can continue at home, where we know the impact is greatest. Next, the Learning Loss Remediation and Student Acceleration Act outlined supports for struggling readers. The act required districts to provide students who are not proficient in reading, as measured by the TCAP, intensive interventions designed to get them on track, including academic summer programming and high-dosage, low-ratio tutoring. The same law also updated requirements for test-based promotion in Tennessee. Only if a student does not take advantage of these interventions or numerous exemptions are they required to repeat the third grade, where they will be provided another year of literacy instruction by a talented and dedicated Tennessee educator. As you can see, these acts are not about promotion and retention, but about a comprehensive approach to early literacy. Although certain students may be required to receive an additional year of instruction in third grade, these laws do not take choice away from school districts and teachers, who can begin academic interventions in kindergarten, first, and second grade before retention is an option in third grade. In fact, components in the acts, including the universal screener, parental notifications, and district literacy plans, support those early intervention efforts. But the fact remains, we do know what happens if a student is not a proficient reader by third grade. Research shows reading by third grade is imperative for a student's ability to graduate high school and enjoy success in college and career and life. And that is why I urge you not to make changes to the test-based promotion portion of the law. On that note, I would like to offer some reassurance from other states who have implemented similar laws to Tennessee, including the test-based promotion component, and seen incredible results for students. The following are findings from research studies on the effect of test-based promotion. In Indiana, researchers found that giving students more time for promotion increased achievement in ELA and math, and the gains persisted into middle school. Importantly, the study found that being retained did not have a negative effect on student attendance or disciplinary incidents in later grades. In Florida, researchers found that the implementation of a test-based promotion policy led to large increases in math and ELA performance in third grade prior to the retention decision, and significant gains in 8th grade math reading tests. Students were also more likely to graduate with a regular diploma. And finally, a study released from the state of Mississippi just this past week found that students who were retained in third grade achieved substantially higher 6th grade ELA scores compared to their peers. Like the study conducted in Indiana, the Mississippi study found that retention had no significant impact on non-academic outcomes, such as absences or special education identification in later grades. And so while I end on Mississippi, I know we talk a lot about the Mississippi story, and rightfully so. I think what that state did has been incredible, but I know that also hearing about another state's success is only so inspiring. I believe that the 2 laws that you all enacted during that special session contain all of the components necessary to create a Tennessee story. I think that they are right here, and I think that we just have to implement those laws and to create the Tennessee story. And with that, I'm ready to take questions that you all may have.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. So, did I hear you correct? You said that the LEAs and the teachers do have say in the retention law?
I would,
Mr. Powers, go ahead.
yes, sir. So I would I would qualify and say what I meant is that they have a choice in all of the options they have leading up to third grade, right? If you look at the way the two laws work in tandem, they may retain students earlier, which would then exempt them from being retained in third grade. So choice comes in there, right? If you're a teacher or a principal and you're looking at screener data or benchmark data in kindergarten and first grade, you can make the choice to hold a student back earlier, which would then allow them to progress through third grade. You can make the choice to send them to summer camps. You can make the choice about which research-based strategies that you want to use. I do want to be clear that the way the law is set up in third grade is prescriptive and does list out the requirements that a student must meet, either the exemption requirements or they have to take advantage of the interventions in order to progress to fourth grade. But again, yes, there is choice in the earlier grades. Then in third grade, the law is very clear about how they can progress to fourth grade.
Representative Glenn?
So it is correct, they have no choice at third grade level.
If a student or family does not take advantage of any of the interventions, and if they don't meet any of the exemption requirements specified in the law requires that they repeat the third grade.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And these tests are based on one moment of one time, basically the TCAP. When the TCAP is administered, that decision is made based off of that one test at that one time whether a child be retained.
So the TCAP is not the only test. It's not the only point where you say that student has to be retained. The TCAP is the apples to apples assessment that we have to compare performance across the state. It's the way that we can tell from a common benchmark where to then direct our efforts, right? So yes, the TCAP is the test in the law that qualifies a student for retention. But in terms of whether they get retained, there's a variety of things that they can take advantage of to not be retained. They can attend a summer program, make adequate progress. They could partner with a TNL core tutor. Those are both options if the student's in the approaching category. If they're in the below category and they're truly one of the struggling readers in the state, they have to do both of those things. And then they would get to progress to the fourth grade. So it isn't that they score a certain score on the TCAP and they have to be retained. It's only if students don't take advantage of the variety of supports. And then again, I would stress, these kids are spending another year with a qualified, talented Tennessee teacher and getting further instruction in science of reading-based practices.
Last question. So if you're saying that they do not take advantage of these after-school programs or summer school programs, then they would be retained. So if I have a student whose parent is a military soldier who receives PCS orders, meaning they're leaving to go to the next duty station, and they failed that test, but yet they did everything else right throughout the year, but they failed that test. But they can't stick around because mom and dad has to move on to the next duty station. Do you now put on that form that that child did not meet the standards to go to the fourth grade? Or do you put on that form that they did meet standards, although they failed the test? So which one does it?
I think there are a variety of extenuating circumstances that you can certainly call out. I will say the state board rule that was promulgated on this specific law also speaks to extenuating circumstances. I also want to call out there's an appeal process that can be filed. And again, the state board rule calling out extenuating circumstances. The intent here is not to pick students who fall into maybe a bucket with one or two other students and just hold them back to hold them back. That's not the intent of the law. It's designed to make sure that kids who are struggling readers get the support that they need to be proficient and advance to the fourth grade with a chance to succeed.
My last statement.
Hold on. We got other people here. I'll come back to you, okay? Quick question for you. You know, you brushed on it briefly. The third grade retention law is trying to address students that have failed a third grade TCAP. Teachers have come to us complaining that these students are showing up multiple grade levels behind. Would it not be a better resource is to address the issue on the front end in kindergarten and 1 before they fall so far behind of using the summer school, using the tutoring, using the interventions, maybe even delaying their progress a year to make sure that they are on track before they hit the rigors of education?
I think that's an excellent question. I mean, I would call out that I think the exact strategy is probably best determined locally in terms of if they want to target holding students back or providing more support in kindergarten, first grade, second grade versus third grade. I can offer data from a state like Mississippi that has gone before Tennessee and enacted this sort of comprehensive literacy reform effort. And you also heard me actually call out the study, I believe, in Florida where this was found to be the case. What you see in Mississippi's data is school districts start to do exactly that. They start to identify students who are not on track and hold them back earlier. They also hold students back in the third grade because, again, we know what the life outcomes and academic outcomes are for those students. But you see school districts start to intervene and retain students earlier so that the students can be, remediated and get on track earlier as well.
Representative Leatherwood.
You mentioned some of the testing in the other states, just mentioned Mississippi there and others earlier on. What do their promotion tests cover? What are they tested for in this promotion test in those other states?
So all of those other states, when you're looking at this specific test-based promotion policy, it's their third grade ELA standardized assessment. So like Tennessee, these other states have a state-specific assessment they've developed, and it's aligned to their state standards. It's aligned to, in the states that have enacted the same sort of comprehensive reform, it's indicative of whether a student is learning the standards and is reading in order to actually start to read to learn in fourth grade and beyond.
Go ahead.
So you said ELA, but that could have different definitions, different places. I wonder, does it focus just on the reading, or in these other states, does the test cover grammar, comprehension, other aspects, or are those reading tests?
That is a good question and may extend past my depth of knowledge on the standardized assessments in other states. I'd be happy to kind of do a little bit of research on that. I will say, just, knowing the context in Tennessee, the assessment is measuring grade level standards in third grade ELA. So it includes a variety of things. It's, I believe the third grade test in Tennessee, don't 100% quote me on this, but I believe it includes a writing and kind of a multiple choice component. So certainly by third grade, you're starting to get into a place where students have to put everything together, right? They have to be able to write, they have to be able to comprehend what they're reading, sound words out, use research-backed strategies, so that then when they move on to fourth grade, that they can tackle social studies and tackle their science coursework and actually be equipped with it. So I would imagine that other states are similar, but without knowing specifically what their tests are, I couldn't tell you specifically. But again, ELA is the topic that this is the subject area.
One more.
Just one more. You mentioned the appeal process that's been developed here. Drill a little bit deeper on that. What do you think of that appeal process? And it's my understanding that some other tests that focus on reading, state required tests, achievement tests, can result in a successful appeal. So what do you think about the appeal process that's been developed? And then what would you think of, why not accept that on the front end instead of requiring parents, school systems, state, everybody to go through the process?
So that is an excellent question, and you mentioned the appeals process. I'll call out that was required to be created in law, but if memory serves, it did not specify exactly what that process must contain. The law required the appeals process to be administered by a parent or guardian, not the school district. I think it's incredibly important that the state has a single measure that we back and say, this is what we're using to tell if our third graders can read, right? We test those students in ELA in fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade. Tennessee's created their own standards, which we're very proud of. I believe they're very rigorous, and they were created after it was kind of found that, hey, we're not doing well in the NAEP. We're graduating all these kids. They're not getting jobs. Our teachers in high school are telling us they can't read. They're coming to us and they can't read. So I believe in our standards. I think it's incredibly important that we have a uniform test that we're saying on the first pass is what we're using to identify the students who need support. Having that appeals process take place afterwards, if there's additional evidence to the contrary, I think is incredibly important. I will say, if there's a case where a student is not proficient in third grade, and perhaps there is data on the screener or the benchmark assessment that does show that contrary to the test, maybe that they're right at that proficiency level, right, that they could technically move on. I don't know if that student attending a summer camp is bad for them. I think that's probably still a really good thing for that student to receive some additional academic support, especially if we have a test, the standardized test, indicating they're not quite to proficient levels yet, but maybe they're kind of building momentum and doing well on the screener. Maybe they did well on their last benchmark assessment. Those are the types of kids that might have a successful appeal here. I think that there's still children that could benefit by some of these additional interventions and supports.
In your opinion, because we keep getting this question about other states and their quote-unquote TCAP scores, their end-of-course assessment in third grade standards across the country, dealing with third graders, there's probably not a lot of differentiation between the standards from state to state to state because we're dealing with third graders here. I understand that could get broader and wider as we get into higher parts of education. But in your opinion, pretty much in the third grade, looking at states across like the ones you've given examples to, our standards can't be that far different than everybody else's. Would you agree?
I was an 11th and 12th grade English teacher, and so I hesitate to tell you definitively. I apologize for not being able to give you a specific answer. Without looking at the third grade ELA standards, I don't want to say, yes, you're probably right. I think it is fair probably to assume in a grade as early as 3, hopefully states have agreed what is the important stuff to be teaching kids, but at the same time, we still have states that haven't instituted the same comprehensive science of reading-based approach that Tennessee has. But when you talk about other states, the ones I named are ones that have. So I think you can, with a state like Florida or Mississippi, you know that those are 2 states like Tennessee have required foundational reading skills and science of reading-based instruction.
Would you agree that there's probably a lot of overlap in the standards from state to state?
There's probably overlap when it comes to the states that have required science of reading.
Thank you. Representative Keene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for sharing with us, sir.
Absolutely.
If I can accurately summarize a discussion we had last week with a group of teachers, there was a feeling among some of them that we're teaching so much to the test that it takes away from their time with the children as far as, ensuring that they get the basic skills and so forth. Your mindset, is such that they should still teach to the test? I'm not talking about that one test, but I think there's a series of tests that take place. And I don't know how that compares with a place like Mississippi or Florida.
So that's another good question. I will say, districts, when you mentioned, is there more than one test? So of course we do just have this in third grade, the TCAP ELA. Districts are using a variety of other local benchmark assessments. Those are where local school districts, in Tennessee are given flexibility and choice to measure kind of progress the way they want. So, those are going to align in various different capacities to TCAP. In terms of teaching to the test, there's one thing I'll call out. I don't have the specific statistic off the top of my head, but I know it's been shown that, the percentage of time kids actually spend testing is not very low. I've seen really talented teachers in Tennessee on school visits that are teaching the standards, which the test assesses. The kids have no idea that they're being prepared for a final test because the teacher is talented and they're planning engaging lessons. Commissioner Schwinn and her administration have really, in addition to this Literacy Success Act, they've supported high-quality instructional materials through Reading 360. I've heard teachers continue to hear them on social media, and when we would take school visits, just echo how important the materials were to support the standards-based instruction leading to the test. So can you get like a release test that was given in third grade the prior year and just drill students on that every day? Yes, you can. I don't think that would have the same results that we're actually seeing in school districts. And I don't think that that's what our teachers are doing. I think that they're using high-quality instructional materials and they're planning engaging lessons that are also preparing the students for the standardized assessment.
Mm-hmm. Just 2 other questions, Mr. Chairman. Other than, I use the term assistance or aid to the children during the summer, what I'm hearing from a number of parents and organizations is that year-round assistance for that child prior to being held back should be the norm instead of, the exception. And where do you stand on that?
I think that's absolutely right, and that year-round assistance is kind of what I was getting to when I said that if you look at both of the laws in consort, that there is a lot of choice there in how that year-round assistance is provided. I mean, we trust, and I know districts are going to be providing that to their most needful students in kindergarten, first and second grade. I mean, that's the way that those laws are designed to work. They're designed to help school districts do that in kindergarten so that we're not all of a sudden getting the kids in third grade and saying, oh, they're behind now, what are we going to do? The law is set up for them to begin to administer those sorts of interventions and that year-round assistance, leading up to third grade. I know there's been legislation filed already this year that'll extend funding, permanently for the summer programming, which I think is critical for that year-round assistance for these other students before they get to third grade.
Okay.
Just to clarify, that legislation is being carried by Chairman Haston, I believe, and it extends these supports starting in kindergarten.
I believe that's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead. Representative
Okay.
Keeman, one more, because we've got
Yes, sir.
people who want to ask questions.
All right, sir. Not just because of testing, but a number of factors. If you tell me I can't ask this question, Mr. Chairman, I understand.
Okay.
But our teachers, some are feeling overwhelmed, going to other professions. Some are leaving the state because they feel that there's too many outside things that are affecting their abilities within the system itself. We're talking about cultural things and all this kind of stuff. Do you have a perspective on that?
Tread lightly.
When I get questions like this, it's hard for me not to just reflect on my own experience as a teacher. I mean, it's certainly a difficult job. Even back when I left the classroom in 2015, 16, I would get students in high school that would come and as I just mentioned, they could read a paragraph out loud perfectly, but they couldn't answer a multiple choice question about what they had just read. So they had missed some kind of critical component early on. There were some of my students, I knew that part of the reason was because they didn't have a supportive home situation. Some of them, it was because they had gone to the elementary school that used whole language instead of science of reading, and then that deficit had just compounded. So there's a variety of efforts. I mean, teaching is certainly a hard job. I will say that, what we see in states like Tennessee that really stick it out and implement these comprehensive literacy reform efforts the way that they're designed, everyone is going in the same direction, so the support is all there in the school building for teachers. When your instruction is grounded in the same principles from district to district, all of a sudden it gets easier because there's resource sharing going on. There's support from the state to make it easier, but it certainly is a difficult job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir.
So members, we've still got one more presenter. I've got 3 more people asking questions, and Mr. Powers has been here under the Inquisition for 30 minutes. So in his capacity with XLED, not with the Department of Education.
Correct.
Okay. Representative Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple of things. We did have some great experts last week talking about the TCAP score and how it was a beautiful presentation. The first time I've heard it done correctly in 10 years about how the way that we calculate that third grade is not a reading level, it's not a grade level score, and that actually the average third grader falls in the approaching proficient range. And we're only calculating proficient and advanced, where the actual average third grader, where they should be, is in the approaching proficient category, and they are reading on grade level at that category. So that was very helpful because the TCAP test is not a reading level or grade level test specifically. We have those, but that test is not one. So the studies that you talked about at the beginning of I would love to see those. Can you get those to the committee so that we could see those studies?
If you'll send those to to me. I'll make sure I get them distributed to everybody.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am,
you,
I would be
Mr.
happy
Chairman.
to.
Okay, that would be great. I'd love to see them. It's counter to much of the vast research that I have done and others have done. I also want to speak to the Mississippi issue. I know that some refer to it as the Mississippi Miracle. Mississippi did a retention bill, retained a whole lot of third graders. Then when they gave the fourth grade national test, there was a huge jump in those scores. And it wasn't because they did so great in that year with their reforms. What happened was the third graders that didn't pass the test were held back. And they only tested the fourth graders who had passed the test the year before. And so I think that we need to be accurate, and that is my concern with some of this, that we need to acknowledge what's happening and we need to control for those types of things. And I'm concerned that some of these ideas don't. But I do understand that we need that test across the state. Another thing those teachers talked about were how the tests across the state, and I think one of my colleagues behind me was mentioning, are we testing the same standards? Because they say we test more standards and alternate them every other year, where some states are just testing that one set of standards. So is that something that you have thought about or had any concern about?
So as I kind of mentioned previously, I do appreciate the question. I don't feel qualified to kind of make a comparison between Tennessee's state standards and other states, nor do I feel qualified to comment on the number of standards, just quite frankly. I do want to, if I may, just quickly kind of respond to the fourth grade NAEP piece in Mississippi, and also just the nature of these studies. So I'll start with the nature of the studies and the memo that I'll make sure the committee has that links to the names of the authors and the names of the studies. So the ones in Indiana, Florida, Arizona, and Mississippi. I think it's important to contextualize those. They were done on states that have similar literacy reform efforts to Tennessee. And that's very important, I think, from a research perspective. I'm not a psychometrician, but I think if we're going to look as Tennessee and say, what's the effect of a test-based promotion policy here, we need to make sure we're considering like states. So it may be that you can find a study conducted in a state that has not done what Tennessee has done, and it may show something different about test-based promotion. But again, I don't think that that would be the apt comparison, since that state has not undertaken the really bold early literacy reform efforts that Tennessee has. And then just in relation to the notion of the students getting held back in Mississippi, I can't speak to that specific piece. I can offer some data, which is that as of the most recent year, Mississippi retained less than 10% of their third graders. So I do think that for sure in Mississippi, as well as what would be the case in Tennessee, you have students who are moving on to fourth grade that are still struggling readers. The difference is they've gotten that support. I don't know if 10% of kids would be enough to sway the NAEP data, just because NAEP, the way that it's sampled, is pulling from specific schools and districts, and but the last thing I'll say is that the study in Mississippi was actually not done, based on achievement data from 14-15. It looked at students in that school year, how they performed later on in their academic career. So we're actually talking about test data from more recent than that long ago. And that study did look at outcomes in terms of their standardized assessment in middle school.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just thank you. I just would like to see those studies because it's not evidenced in the research that I've looked at.
Yes,
so
ma'am,
I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
We'll make sure the committee gets that data. Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick questions for clarity. You failed to mention it, but I believe the law does allow for a retest. Is that correct?
That is correct. So thank you for calling that out. It allows for a retest on ELA, on the ELA TCAP.
One other point of clarity, as a state, we gave, I believe it was Pearson, a lot of money to design our test for the TCAP. Is that correct, or was it another company?
I would have to defer to the department on that. I don't remember or know off the top of my head.
The answer is yes.
I thought I remembered that correctly. That said, that same company designs tests for a bunch of other states as well. And if I remember the discussions we had in the committee about doing that, we insisted on validity and repeatability in those tests. Validity means you're measuring what you think you're measuring, and repeatability, if you give it multiple times, you get close to the same answer. Is that not true of this test just as it is in the other states?
Again, the way the test was developed, I'd have to defer to the department. I would assume that we want our test to be valid and repeatable, though.
The answer is yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will defer further questions in the interest of time.
Mr. Glenn, you get to finish this out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
One question.
One question, okay.
Make it count.
Make it count. Excuse me. So on the, when you talked about the measures that the state would use to decide in the appeal process, why not give the LEA the same ability to use your measures and make the decision on the ground instead of having to come to the state? Because you're putting the parents through a whole lot when it's a decision that the LEAs can make.
So I will respectfully probably defer to the department there on that, just because they are the body that conducts rulemaking along with the State Board of Education, and they can probably, better than I can, just address the decision-making. Again, I will say the decision-making piece on the appeals was spelled out in the law.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Powers, thank you for your testimony today. It's been very enlightening. We appreciate it, and you did very well. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chairman.
Last person today is Tennessee School Board Association. Mr. Torres, come on up, introduce yourself, and you have 5 minutes, and we'll see how long we can keep you here.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I do understand that I'm the last presentation of the day, so I'm separating you from adjournment. So I just wanted to talk to you about one specific issue that a lot of districts are facing right now, and you may be familiar with this in your own district. A lot of districts are facing vacancy issues with teachers. They have certain areas that are just very difficult to staff. Special education, English language learners, secondary math and science, foreign languages. It's very difficult to staff those areas. And I wanted to bring this all to your attention because right now in Tennessee, we're looking at a number of different statistical factors that are starting to come into play. When you look at the number of educators that are eligible to retire, there's several thousands of educators that right at this very moment can retire. Each year that number increases. When you look at the retention data and you look at the number of people actually going into the profession, those numbers are on the decline. So one request is, as you all go over legislation, as you look at the different things that would be implemented statewide, we just ask that you also look at the impact that it's going to have on the day-to-day activities in the schools. And a lot of you do that. A lot of you speak with your teachers on a regular basis. You speak with your principals, your school board members, your superintendents, and we're very grateful for that. But we just encourage you to continue to do that because there are a lot of situations, difficult situations that districts are dealing with right now. And any help that we can get with teacher retention, teacher recruitment is certainly well appreciated.
Mr. Torres, the governor has proposed raising the minimum salary of teachers from roughly $38,000 to $50,000 by 2026. What kind of impact will that have, do you believe, on teachers and teacher recruitment?
I think it's going to have an impact. I mean, as you increase that salary, you're going to hopefully entice more people to come into the profession. One of the things that we're also looking at, and we've discussed, it's not necessarily getting people graduating out of EPPs into the profession, but how do you recruit people into those educator prep programs in the first place? And hopefully with the salary increase, that will be a way to entice people to come into the educator prep programs and seek a teaching degree.
Representative Glenn, you're up. You want to say something? You're good? Okay. Representative Keem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm posing a question to you, but I think I'm talking to the Department of Education, we as legislators, and the administration. I hear what we're saying about raising salaries, but I guess I want to say, whether I'm right or wrong, what are we going to do about it? You know, we're talking about it. We think we throw a few dollars at, and that's more than a few dollars, at it, and that's going to solve it. I mean, working conditions, I think, are very important also. And I just didn't know who to ask, who to talk to about what are we going to do about it. I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Mr. Torres.
I think certainly the department may want to answer some of those questions, but I'll give you one example that we hear a lot from districts. It's student discipline. There's a number of issues that are related to student discipline, and it's not necessarily student discipline with the general student population. There are certain situations dealing with special education students that require more than just the traditional disciplinary model. And it kind of goes back to the vacancy that we have in those areas. It's finding the right people, I mean, with the right heart to fill those positions. Not everybody can step into the position of being a special education teacher. You have to have the right heart to do it. And I'm certainly thankful for the teachers that are willing to do that. I mean, it just takes a special person. So that's just one area, but also looking at the day-to-day requirements. You know, are there things that can be done at a state level to remove some of those requirements and potentially even at a local level? So that's...
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We heard a lot of anecdotal evidence coming back from COVID with the discipline issues with our kids, with the reacclimation to the classroom. Can you speak to that at all? Is that a real issue that we're facing here in Tennessee?
We've heard that from districts, students coming back in the classroom that weren't in the classroom or weren't in that structured environment, certainly facing those issues. Of course, there are a number of other factors outside of the school's control that certainly impact that. You know, the home situation of the student. That can cover a number of things. So we've heard that it is impacting student discipline.
Thank you. Representative Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for addressing things other than salary. Certainly, teachers need their pay raise, or like still, even with this current raise, they're making less today than they did 10 years ago with cost of living. But I really appreciate you mentioning those special ed students. And the reality is it does require a certain type of person that understands. That's who I worked with, you know, high school behavior disorder and emotionally disturbed kids. And you really have to understand where those behaviors are coming from and not take it personally. But one thing that Knox County did that was so amazing initially when we started what we called a satellite program was we had, you know, 2 counselors in that room, or that came to that room a couple of times weekly. We started every morning with groups so kids could talk about what happened at their house last night. You know, 30 minutes sitting down and discussing it, and then 30 minutes at the end of the day sitting down discussing how your day went. And just being able to talk about those things made all the difference. Like, I had the worst kids behaviorally in the school and probably sent someone to a principal 3 times in a year. And so, you know, you can deal with those things, but we needed the resources to make that happen. And when we first started the program, it was fabulous. We had all the resources. But as you see a lot of time with great programs, they start reducing. And then we only had 1 counselor, and then the counselor was spread between more classes. But I can tell you, when you make that address, but the problem was when we got the new standards and they said you have to be teaching this standard at this time, when we walk in the classroom, that did away with the problem solving and the group portion of that program that was so important for those kids. So teachers were terrified to step away from their standards and instruction to do some of the, you know, the little bit of counseling type trust building work with the group. And so I feel like we have got to get back to that for so many of our kids, because my students, no one thought they would graduate, and 95% of my students graduated with that mental health component, with a regular ed diploma. And you can't say that for most classes like that. But when they're able to get their emotionality right, they were able to learn. So I appreciate you understanding the impact of that.
Members? Well, Mr. Torres, you have it easy today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. You know, to address standards, what we might do is invite the State Board of Education, Mr. James, to come up here next week and maybe address some of those issues with standards and how they're created and what the steps are with those moving forward, so that we can have a better understanding about how that's all created to be able to have better conversations on that. Members, if there's anybody that you would like us to bring up here to talk and testify, we want to continue these conversations even after we close this committee. At Chairman Moody's committee, after we take care of all the bills in this committee, we want to continue these at the full committee so all the members in our committee and Chairman White's committee can have these ongoing conversations about education, because we've got to get this right. The future of Tennessee depends on us getting this right. And so we're all in on making this happen. If there's anybody you want us to bring in to talk and have these conversations, I think it's very fruitful for us to do that, okay? At this time, if nobody has any, Chairman White?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everybody may know this, but next Wednesday in the Education Administration Committee at 1:30 that meets, we'll continue this discussion on early childhood literacy as we've been kind of talking about. So you're very welcome to come on in that hearing room 1, 1:30 Wednesday. We'll be inviting Mississippi to come and share with what they did. We'll be inviting third grade teachers, superintendents all across the state, and to inform us on exactly what is happening. I think one of the things that was pointed out by our Excellence in Ed is that we need to make choices in earlier grades. The fact that we're talking about holding an 8-year-old back, we've already missed the mark. So we need to work on what we need to do with our earlier grades. And so we'll be talking about all that as we get ready for further discussion on the third grade retention.
And then committee and also Chairman White and Chairman Moody, Colleen Ellis has taken notes on all these conversations we've had. I'll have her forward those to the members of both committees, so you can have those as working knowledge as we move forward, okay? All right, without any objection, I motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. We are adjourned.
Mr. Chair.